January 1944. Before dawn breaks over the frozen valleys of central Italy, fog clings to the riverbanks like a living thing. The air smells of wet stone, diesel fumes, and burned cordite. Somewhere beneath the mist, a river flows cold and relentless, swollen by winter rain. German sentries peer through binoculars, convinced that the water before them is protection enough. Rivers stop armies. Rivers delay wars. That is what they have been taught. But across the darkness, engines murmur softly. Steel clinks against steel. Hammers strike, not in chaos, but in rhythm. By sunrise, the impossible begins to take shape. This moment mattered because by 1944, the German army no longer fought for conquest alone. It fought for time. After years of rapid advances, the war had turned against them. American and Allied forces were pushing inland across Europe, and German defensive doctrine relied heavily on geography. Rivers, blown bridges, and destroyed crossings were meant to slow the enemy, to bleed momentum from the Allied advance. Engineering obstacles were as critical as tanks and artillery. Every destroyed bridge was expected to buy days, sometimes weeks. What the German High Command did not fully grasp was that the United States Army had transformed engineering into a weapon of speed. German soldiers had been trained to expect scarcity in the enemy, slow logistics, delays, hesitation under fire. Their experience on the Eastern Front had reinforced this belief. Bridges took time, supplies ran thin, improvisation was limited. Rivers were natural allies. Instead, what they witnessed was abundance in motion. American engineer battalions arrived with prefabricated steel trusses, pontoons, cranes, bulldozers, and trucks packed with spare parts. Bailey bridges, modular steel bridge sections invented in Britain and mass-produced with American industrial capacity, were unloaded piece by piece. Each component had a place. Each soldier had a role. Training manuals had been memorized months earlier, rehearsed in camps thousands of miles away. German reconnaissance reports from Italy and later Normandy recorded the same unsettling pattern, bridges appearing where none existed hours earlier. One captured German engineer officer later described it as industrial warfare, noting that American crossings seemed less like construction and more like assembly lines pushed to the front. The expectation had been delay. The reality was acceleration. Historical records confirm the scale of this capability. During the Italian campaign alone, U.S. Army engineers built or repaired over 2,500 bridges under combat conditions. In Normandy, American engineers constructed dozens of crossings within hours of landing, despite mines, shell fire, and flooding deliberately caused by retreating German forces. After the breakout from Normandy, engineer units supported advances moving faster than any previous army in European history, sometimes over 20 miles per day. German soldiers watching from defensive positions struggled to reconcile what they saw. Bridges were not only built quickly, they were built repeatedly. Destroying one no longer guaranteed safety. Another would appear upstream or downstream before nightfall. The recurring symbol was steel. Steel girders carried by hand through mud. Steel panels bolted together under fire. Steel pontoons floating into position as shells splashed around them. Where German doctrine emphasized demolition, American doctrine emphasized replacement. Where one side focused on destruction, the other focused on rebuilding faster than destruction could keep pace. This contrast cut deeper than tactics. It struck at ideology. German military culture prized precision, planning, and control, but it also depended on hierarchy and limitation. Resources were finite. Fuel was rationed. Equipment was reused until it failed. American engineering reflected a different philosophy entirely: overwhelming supply, decentralized execution, and trust in trained specialists. Engineer units were empowered to make decisions on the ground, adopting designs to terrain without waiting for orders from distant headquarters. Captured German diaries reveal a growing psychological impact. One entry from a Wehrmacht infantryman near the Rhine in early 1945 noted that destroyed bridges no longer feel permanent. Another described the sound of American construction, engines, metal striking metal, as more demoralizing than artillery fire, because it signaled that resistance had failed to slow the advance. That sound became the battlefield's quiet anthem. Hammers echoed through valleys at night. Engines hummed through fog. The river no longer whispered safety. Instead, it carried the metallic rhythm of inevitability. This experience transformed perception. German soldiers began to understand that they were not facing an army scraping forward on improvisation, but one propelled by an entire continent's productive capacity. American engineers were not merely builders, they were symbols of a system that could replace loss faster than it could be inflicted. Factual evidence supports this realization. By 1944, the United States was producing more steel than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. American factories turned out not only tanks and aircraft, but bridges, trucks, rails, and tools in quantities previously unimaginable. Engineer units were supplied as generously as frontline combat troops, reflecting an understanding that mobility was decisive. The bridge itself became more than a crossing, it became proof. Proof that rivers could be ignored, proof that obstacles were temporary, proof that destruction could be answered with creation. For German soldiers raised on the belief that warfare was about breaking the enemy's capacity, this abundance was profoundly unsettling. You could destroy an American bridge, but you could not exhaust the system that built it. By the final months of the war, German commanders issued orders to defend crossings not because bridges mattered, but because delaying engineers had become one of the few remaining tools. Yet even then, the delay was measured in hours, not days. And always the steel returned. In the end, these bridges carried more than tanks and trucks. They carried an idea that a society organized around production, coordination, and shared purpose could move faster than fear. That democracy, often dismissed as inefficient, could mobilize skill and resources at a scale authoritarian systems could not sustain. Long after the guns fell silent, many of those bridges remained, repaired and reinforced, becoming part of Europe's post-war recovery. What had begun as instruments of war quietly transitioned into pathways of peace. The river still flows, steel still spans it, and in that silent structure remains the memory of a moment when German soldiers realized that the war was no longer about holding ground, but about facing a force that could rebuild the world faster than it could be torn apart.